On May 14, 2008, at 2:30 in the morning, a father stood in the middle of a dark highway, a cell phone pressed to his ear. Miles away, lost in that same darkness, his son was walking. They were talking to each other, a lifeline of voices trying to bridge the distance. They were trying to find each other. Then, a sudden exclamation, 2 words. And for the next several hours, the father stayed on the line, listening to the sound of the wind, the occasional rustle of grass, and the terrifying, absolute silence of a son who vanished while his parents were listening. This is not just another missing persons case, it is a geographical impossibility, a mystery that challenges our understanding of GPS, human perception, and the vast empty spaces of the American Midwest. This is the story of Brandon Swanson. Brandon was the definition of reliable. A 19-year-old student at Minnesota West Community and Technical College, he was passionate about wind turbines and electronics. On the evening of May 13th, the spring semester had just ended. Brandon did what any 19-year-old would do after a long term of study. He went to a party in the small town of Canby, Minnesota, to celebrate with friends. By all accounts, he had a couple of drinks, but every witness agreed he was nowhere near intoxicated when he got in his car to leave. He was headed home to Marshall, a 30-mile drive he had made countless times. It should have been routine, but at 1:54 a.m., his parents' phone rang. It was Brandon. He told them his car, a Chevy Lumina, was stuck in a ditch. He said he was unhurt and near the town of Lind. He sounded calm, he sounded safe, or so everyone thought. To understand why Brandon Swanson vanished, we have to travel back in time to 2008. This was a world before Google Maps lived on every phone. GPS was a luxury, not a standard feature. Brandon, on the phone with his father, Brian, was using the oldest navigation system known to man, sight. He told his dad, "I can see the lights of Lind. I'm walking toward them," for the next 47 minutes. Brian and his wife Annette drove through the darkness around Lind, flashing their car's lights, honking their horn, desperately trying to signal their son. Over the phone, Brandon's voice would rise with hope. "I see you." "No, wait, I don't see you. Are you sure you're flashing your lights?" Each time the connection was missed. The 2 cars, 2 sets of headlights, were like ships passing in the night, impossibly close yet worlds apart. Here is the terrifying reality that was discovered later. Brandon was never near Lind. He was 25 miles away, near the town of Taunton. How does a local boy, someone who grew up in these parts, get that lost on roads he knows? To understand this, we have to look at something called the grid effect. Rural Minnesota is a landscape of perfect geometry. The roads are laid out in a strict grid, running perfectly straight for miles. The fields are vast, flat, and often identical. At night, with no moon, there is zero depth perception. The world flattens into a canvas of absolute black, punctuated by distant, ambiguous lights. Investigators now believe that what Brandon thought were the lights of Lind were actually the towering grain elevators or the lights on a local ethanol plant structures that, from a distance in the dark, can easily be mistaken for a town's skyline. He was walking toward a mirage. The phone call reached the 47-minute mark. Brandon was still walking, describing his surroundings to his father. He said he was cutting across a field. He mentioned hearing the sound of running water. He talked about climbing over a fence. "I'm almost there, Dad. I'm just crossing this field." Wait. And then, the 2 words that have haunted his family for over a decade. "Oh, *T. Brian Swanson's heart dropped. He called out his son's name. He thought maybe Brandon had fallen, tripped in a hole, or injured himself. He never imagined it was the end. He stayed on the phone calling out for Brandon for hours. The line remained open, a dead channel, until the phone's battery finally died. But in the moment, after those final words, there was nothing. Why was there no splash if he fell into water? Why were there no footsteps running away? Why was there only silence? The search for Brandon Swanson became one of the largest in Minnesota's history when authorities finally pinged the location of his last cell tower connection. They found his car miles away from Lind, exactly where the phone data said it would be. The car was perched on the edge of a gravel road, but it wasn't badly stuck. One person could have likely pushed it out, but for some reason Brandon chose to walk. Bloodhounds were brought in to trace his path from the abandoned vehicle. One highly trained search dog followed Brandon's scent for 3.5 miles. The trail led through fields, across gravel roads, and directly to the edge of the Yellow Medicine River. Then, the dog did something that stunned the handlers. It jumped into the water, swam across to the other side, and picked up the scent again before finally losing it at another gravel road. This single piece of evidence spawned a new, darker theory. Did the trail go cold because someone picked him up on that road? Or had the scent simply become too old and dispersed for the dog to follow any further? We also have to consider the hypothermia theory. It was a cold night in May, with temperatures dropping into the 30s. When the human body begins to freeze, the brain malfunctions. It's a cruel paradox of hypothermia that people often feel intensely hot and start removing their clothes. They also experience a primal instinct to burrow, to hide in small enclosed spaces to find warmth. Could Brandon be inside a farm pipe, under a pile of debris that has since been built over or moved? Then there's the most obvious theory, the river. Despite years of searching the Yellow Medicine River with sonar, divers and teams walking the banks, No trace of Brandon has ever been found. And this isn't the Amazon. It's a relatively small, shallow river. How could it hide a body for more than 15 years without giving up a single clue? Out of this tragedy, a significant change was made. Before Brandon's case, law enforcement would often wait 24 or even 72 hours before starting a search for a missing adult. Because of the tireless fight by the Swanson family, that law changed in Minnesota. It's called Brandon's Law, and it mandates that police must immediately begin an investigation into a missing adult if the circumstances are deemed dangerous. Brandon's legacy is that no other family has to endure that agonizing wait while a loved one is in danger. Every year, the snow melts in rural Minnesota, revealing the dormant fields beneath, and every year, people look out at those fields with a renewed sense of hope. Brian and Annette Swanson still live in the same area. They still wonder about that final desperate call. They still listen for an answer in the silence. Brandon Swanson didn't just walk into the night. He walked into a mystery that technology couldn't solve and time hasn't healed. He is a permanent reminder that even in our hyper-connected world, the darkness is still very, very large. If you have seen anything, or if you live in the Lincoln or Lyon County areas of Minnesota, your information could be the key that finally brings Brandon home. Thanks for watching.